Good evening, everybody. Tonight's lesson, a stranger to Passover, developing a taste for the divine. It's all about developing a taste for the divine. We use the Pesach rituals and the Seder to teach us something very important about being a Jew. Now, I want to just preface that whatever we say in terms of the legal aspects of the practice that we are meant to have the night of the Seder, the night of Pesach, it primarily refers to the practice during the time of the temple. Good evening. Primarily during the time of the temple when we offered the Paschal sacrifice. We offered the Pesach, the Korban Pesach. So the Torah provides us, the Torah tells us that it's not okay. In other words, the kind of people who have to participate are only Jewish people. The Pesach sacrifice is something that's unique. God wants the Jewish people to partake in, and He doesn't want non-Jews to partake. That was in the time of the temple. That's when we brought up Korban Pesach. Now, I have been asked in the past, as a rabbi, I've been asked, some people just open the Chumash and they say, well, you see, right here it says clearly you can't have a non-Jewish person eat from the Paschal sacrifice, so that means I can't have a non-Jew by the Seder. So, no, this is a mistake. It's not so. Unless it's Shabbos, unless it's, take that back. There is no problem mitzad this. In other words, from this perspective itself of whether the Torah forbids a non-Jew from participating in the Korban Pesach, does that automatically mean that you can't have a non-Jew by the Seder? This is incorrect. It just simply means that in the time of the temple, we were not allowed to share the Korban Pesach with a non-Jew. And there are all kinds of such laws in the Torah where this is for a Jewish person, this is just for a Jewish person, and we could talk about Judaism's exclusive policies and whether those are fair or they're right in light of Western values. So that we could have another separate discussion. But I just want to clarify that we're talking about tonight, but this idea of a non-Jew not participating in the Korban Pesach does not mean. First of all, it's not practiced today, number one. Number two, it does not mean that a non-Jew can't be by the Seder. My parents' Seder, my parents often would have non-Jews by the Seder. In fact, there was a great rabbi in Europe who was friendly with, I should say that had to be friendly at that time, with the commissioner or the police commissioner or the mayor or the governor. I don't remember exactly what level of government he occupied, but he invited him Pesach by night to participate in the Seder, because in that area it was common for there to be blood libels. And they would accuse the Jews of doing all kinds of things, mixing, dipping the matzah, all kinds of crazy rituals they would accuse the Jewish people. So he used to invite him to come and participate and have part of the matzah and, participate in the Seder. And so this was a common thing. They had goyim by the Seder. So what's my point? My point is we're going to learn about this subject simply in order to bring out a point. That's the purpose, to bring out a certain point. Okay.
Good. I have a very good friend at work who's trying to come every year to our Seder. She keeps on asking me about it.
When's the Seder? She wants to come to the Seder.
Yeah, but this year, the last couple of years, she can't come because it's good for her. But
Yeah, I could see where there's a conflict between a Good Friday and the Seder.
Yeah.
So, just as an introduction to our discussion, we have seen, ironically, that the law of the state of Israel sometimes has been more extreme than the Torah law itself. In what case? So there was a fellow by the name of Oswald Drufeisen, who was born in 1922, as a Jew, in Poland, and when the Nazis came in, he fled to and hid in a convent, and ultimately after the war, or very soon, perhaps even in the middle of the war, converted to Catholicism. And when the state of Israel was established, he sought to immigrate to Israel under the law of return, which allows any Jew anywhere to be able to achieve citizenship in Israel. And they turned him down because he had converted to Christianity. Well, you converted to Christianity, we're not accepting. So he fought it all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court backed the verdict of the lower courts that because he had converted, he was not entitled to a Jewish citizenship under the state of Israel. Ultimately, he was able to make it in. He was able to settle ultimately in Israel, but that wasn't after a very long fight. And it's just very ironic that here the Torah says that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew, regardless of whether or not they convert. Ultimately, he's a Jew. And here the state of Israel goes and says, well, you converted. I'm sorry, you're out. You're out. And it's so ironic because today there is such a disconnect between when we have the whole question of who is a Jew, especially after all of the Russian Jews came from Russia. So the question became who is a Jew. So you have to be able to establish your credentials as a Jew. And many people would like to see that even Jews who don't want to accept Judaism, so just by participating in some rituals or whatever it might be, they're going to assume the identity of a Jew, which of course is a great source of disagreement and dissension amongst the Jewish community. And I don't want to go into that discussion at all. I'm just mentioning the disparity that we're seeing here. Okay, so this was all in the time of the temple, that a non-Jew wasn't to participate in eating of the Korban Pesach. In text number 1a, God said to Moshe and Aaron, this is the statute of the Passover sacrifice. No estranged one may partake of it. So now, here is where it gets interesting. It gets interesting in the next text. Rashi explains, based on the teachings of the Chazal, he says in 1b, no estranged one, whose deeds have become estranged from his Father in heaven. Both a Gentile and an Israelite apostate are meant. So if there was a Jew who renounced his Judaism, if there was a Jew who, chose to abandon Yiddishkeit, and what are we talking about over here in terms of the apostate is somebody who publicly has disavowed the God of Israel, disavowed the Torah of Israel, and is in the state of, the halachic state of being an apostate. So in that case, that individual would also not be permitted to eat from the Pesach sacrifice. Why? We're going to see soon. But the idea that an apostate cannot participate in Jewish ritual to some degree is evident in the following text, which describes the events after the sin of the golden calf. Here's what it says, text number 3. Our sages said Moshe initiated three things to which God agreed. The third is with regard to the laws of Passover. When the Jews sinned with the golden calf, Moshe said, the Paschal lamb was only performed once in Egypt, and yet God instructed me that no foreigner may partake of it. How then can the Jews who have just served idolatry receive the entire Torah? Immediately Moshe went ahead and shattered the tablet. So this is explaining Moshe's calculation. When he came down from the mountain and he observed the Jewish people had sinned with the golden calf, he said, they had to, God only gave the mitzvah of eating the Korban Pesach only one time in Egypt, and yet God instructed then that no foreigner should partake of the Korban Pesach in Egypt already. And that was when the Jews were at a very lowly spiritual state. Now God is giving all of the Torah, so certainly He doesn't want a foreigner to participate in all the Torah. So He took the tablets and He smashed them. So this is somewhat puzzling because we know in text number 3, we know this from Tractate Sanhedrin to Talmud. Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda stated, though one has sinned, they remain a Jew. Af al pi shechata Yisrael, who even though a Jew may have deviated from the path of God, nonetheless they retain their identity as a Jew. Can't tell you how many camp songs have been composed with this theme. These Chabad camp songs. Teaching the value of a Jew, and regardless of what the person may have done in their lifetime, but they still retain their Judaism. And at the end of, I think I even repeated the story of Chaim Cohen, who was a Supreme Court justice in Israel, who originally had been a practicing Jew, and at some point decided that he was going to become a lawyer, and ultimately became a judge, and in that capacity worked tirelessly to undermine all of religion as much as possible from his seat on the high court. He tried to undermine religion in Israel, and yet he came to 770 on the second day of Simchas Torah. In other words, this was the second night of Simchas Torah, which was the time when the Israeli consulate would always visit, because they only were celebrating one day. So along with them came Chaim Cohen, came to 770, and the Rebbe instructed that they give him a Sefer Torah, so they gave him the heaviest Sefer Torah. And for 45 minutes, he was dancing with the Torah. And although people had a hard time, like here we have Chaim Cohen, he's in 70, came to the Rebbe, so what's he coming for? He's so anti-religious. And the Rebbe instructed them to give him a Sefer Torah. He danced with the Torah. And I've mentioned this in the past, that at the end of his life, he instructed that he have a Jewish burial. As secular-minded as he was, he didn't prefer cremation, God forbid, but he dafka wanted a Jewish burial, that he should die as a Jew, and have a tahara and ultimately a burial, which was, we can't say for certain, but it seems like it was something that he clung to at least some semblance of Jewish belief, so that even though he didn't live like a Jew, at least he died like a Jew.
Also, wasn't there the Archbishop of Paris who was Jewish or something like that?
That goes back a long time.
No. I don't know if it's the Archbishop, but there was someone also who had converted during the war.
Oh, you're saying during the war? Okay.
And I think he wanted some sort of a Jewish. He wanted people to say Kaddish.
Yes,
heard about
there's a movie. It's a movie about it. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's probably based on a true story.
Yeah.
So that's another great example of this. I thought you were talking about other cases throughout history where we had Jews who converted and kind of retained their affiliation to a degree. Okay, so just to capitalize on the point that was made earlier from the Talmud, that Misha Afal Pishachata Yisrael, even though someone who sins is still a Jew. So the Talmud says in Brachos, it says, a person who ate garlic and his breath smells, should he continue eating garlic so that his breath smells even worse? In other words, why does the Torah tell you that somebody who is an apostate is not permitted to partake of the Pesach sacrifice? What's the reason? What's the logic? If anything, we should give him an opportunity to participate in the Pesach sacrifice. And just to add to it, also in Chabad, when it comes to Pesach time, it's important to us that every Jew have a Seder to go to. And it's important to us that every Jew, regardless of who he may be or she may be, eat matzah on Pesach. Matzah is referred to by the Zohar as mechlo de mehimnusa, the bread of faith. And we earnestly believe that if a Jew eats matzah on Pesach, this will revive their spiritual sensitivities. And so therefore I want to repeat something that I wrote about in my email last week. If you read my emails, in case you read my emails, a lot of people don't read the emails, probably goes to spam. But in case you do, this is just a repetition. I hope you forgive me if it's a repetition. And that is that if anybody knows of somebody who they're just not up to having matzah for whatever reason, either they can't afford it or because they are religiously challenged to the point where they're just not going to get themselves matzah, we will get the matzah. We can't force them to eat it. We're not going to force them to eat it. No force feeding. But we will get the matzah. So please let me know. If you know somebody who doesn't have matzah for Pesach, a couple of matzahs to have the Seder, please do let me know. We will get the matzah. We will deliver it to their home.
On the record, though, I take issue with the garlic comment.
The garlic.
The garlic comment, yeah.
You're saying we should continue to have more garlic. If you have garlic and your mouth smells from garlic, continue having garlic. You might as well.
So just...
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. What's the reason why an apostate cannot participate in the Korban Pesach? What's the reason that the Chinuch, the Sefer Chinuch brings, is one of the medieval commentaries on the mitzvahs in text number 5. It is not appropriate that an apostate partake of this sacrifice. The Paschal Lamb is offered as a sign to commemorate how we were taken under the wings of the Holy Shekhinah then and entered the covenant of Torah and faith. Thus, it is improper to feed it to someone who represents opposite ideals, a man who defected from the community and renounced his faith. Regarding such matters, the Talmud will sometimes state it's only rational. Namely, the matter doesn't require further support. Svarahi. It makes sense. Because the whole idea of the Pesach sacrifice is that we've come under the wings of the Shekhinah. And we've embraced the faith in one God, in monotheism. We don't believe in pagan ideas. And we don't practice their ideas. So somebody who has renounced that principle should not partake in a carbon whose purpose is to display that those who are eating it have embraced those principles. Just simply irrational for somebody to do that. So therefore, we don't allow him to do it. I want to just mention that my sister, who's now today a shlucha, or a shlicha, depending how you pronounce it, in Philadelphia. She at one time lived in Chiang Mai, Thailand. She was a shliach there. And I actually had the privilege of visiting them for a Pesach.
Thailand?
Yeah, in Thailand. It was a fascinating trip, and they had a big public seder for about 120, 125 Israeli backpackers, and that was with minimal advertising. Had they advertised just a week before, they probably would have had 250 or so, just like, at the snap of the fingers. So I recall her describing how there was a monk, a Buddhist monk, because there's a lot of Buddhists there, a Buddhist monk who was Jewish, who rediscovered his roots through the Chabad house. And he showed up, and long discussions, long talks, and he rediscovered Judaism as a result. I don't know where he is today, but this happens. Jewish people return. They come back to their roots. But nonetheless, in terms of practice, this is the one mitzvah where we say, don't participate in this mitzvah because it means something. The purpose of this mitzvah is to demonstrate that those who are eating it believe in something. You chose not to believe. It's not a punishment. It's just simply, you don't belong doing this. This is not for you to do. Okay. But there is another interesting alternative explanation for the words kol ben nechar, any estranged person. Let's begin with a statement that's made in the Haggadah. We're going to read this, God willing, in 13 days. 12 days we'll be reading it. We'll be sitting around the table with our families, God willing, and we'll be reading the following two paragraphs as they appear in the Haggadah in text number 6. The night is a night of questions. We ask 4 questions. The 4 sons that the Torah identifies in 4 different places will ask you questions. There's one that is wise, and there's one that's wicked. So in text number 6, here's what it says. The wise one, what does he say? What's his question? His question is, what are the testimonies, the statutes, and laws which the Lord our God has commanded you? You in turn shall instruct him. This is your answer. You will instruct him in the laws of Passover until the law, meaning up until the point where you reach describing the law that one is not to eat any dessert after the Paschal Lamb. There's a law that once you're finished with the Paschal Lamb, there's no dessert afterwards. So there's no coffee or tea, there's no brownies, there's no chocolate rum balls, there's kosher for Pesach, obviously. None of that the Seder night. You could have it the next day, you could have it, but the Seder night, after the Korban Pesach, there's no dessert. You have to allow the taste to linger in your mouth. Okay, we're going to see a little bit more. We're going to try to explore some deeper significance of that mitzvah. And I think you'll appreciate it. The next paragraph. The wicked one, what does he say? What is this service to you? He says to you, but not to him. In other words, he's careful to articulate his discomfort and discontent with the way you're carrying out the Seder. It's for you, not for me. This got nothing to do with me, my friends. But by thus excluding himself from the community, he has denied that which is fundamental. You therefore blunt his teeth and say to him, because of this, the Lord did this for me when I went out of Egypt. For me, but not for him. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. What does this mean? Why are we answering him this way? Why are we answering the wise one the way we answer the wise one? That you should allow the taste to linger. Why are we responding to the wicked son by saying, we're going to hack his shin, we're going to blunt his teeth? Why are we blunting his teeth? What's the point? What is this all about? Some people misspell the word hake, at least in the way they translate it. They say hake, not blunt his teeth, hake hey chafe or hey kafe, which means knock out his teeth. But that's incorrect. That's incorrect. So now, the verse tells us in text number 7a, and you shall tell your son on that day, saying, because of this, the Lord did this for me when I went out of Egypt. Says Rashi, the foremost commentary of the Torah, tells us in text 7b, because of this, in other words, this is why God took me out, because of this, in order that I fulfill his commandments, such as the Passover, sacrifice, matzah, and bitter herbs. God took me out of Egypt, so I should perform this mitzvah. Why did he take me out? So I should do this mitzvah. That's the reason why I was taken out of Egypt. Next paragraph, the Lord did this for me. This alludes to the reply given to the wicked son to say, the Lord did this for me, but not for you. Had you been there, you would not have been worthy of being redeemed.
Seems harsh.
It's harsh. So there's an interesting nuance here. It seems like both the response to the wise son and to the wicked son revolve around food. Now, mind you, everything in Judaism revolves around food. Right? They wanted to kill us. God saved us. Let's eat. That's the way it works. Every time there's a Yom Tov, we make a suda, make a feast. So it revolves around food. We're saying the wise one is saying, what are we saying to the wise one? Is in order that I fulfill his commandments, such as Passover sacrifice. In other words, God took me out of Egypt, so I should eat the Pesach sacrifice. You would not be able to. In other words, this is not for you to eat because, in fact, you would not have been redeemed. God took me out God redeemed me. God took me out in order that I should be able to eat it. You, however, being the wicked son, God wouldn't have taken you out to eat this. It's all about the food. What's the message here? The Ritva, one of the medieval commentaries, picks up on this. Here's what he says in text number 8. You shall blunt his teeth. He wishes to chew and eat with his teeth. So tell him, it is because of this that God did this for me when I went out of Egypt, for me, but not for you. What's the response over here to the wise son and the wicked son? It's all taste related. To the wise son, we say, savor the taste. Savor the taste in your mouth. To the wicked son, we say, you can't taste it. What are we actually saying? What is the message here? To the wise son, we're saying, savor the taste. The taste is something for you. God took you out in order to have this taste of the Passover sacrifice in your mouth. The wicked son, you can't taste it. It's not for you. So there's a beautiful teaching over here from one of the great Chassidic masters. His name was Rabbi Mordechai Yosef of Izbitz. Izbitz is the name of a town. Here's what he says. I think you'll appreciate this. Someone who is a stranger, in quotes, to the words of Torah will not understand or feel the taste or the reason. For in truth, the reason for the Paschal Lamb is that one should feel the taste of freedom from being enslaved to worldly pleasures. Egypt was the epitome of hedonistic desires. As the Mechilta states, no slave was able to escape from Egypt. This was because they were under the influence of its materialistic pleasures. It was more desirable to be a slave in Egypt than a nobleman in any other country. God took us out of Egypt so that we may accept the yoke of Torah and mitzvahs. For then a person can appreciate that all physical pleasures are empty and fleeting without any vitality. One who is a stranger to the Torah, however, can't comprehend the goodness of the exodus from Egypt. Superficially, he too may be keeping the mitzvah of Passover sacrifice, but he won't feel its taste at all. So again, let's read that paragraph again. One who is a stranger to the Torah, however, can't comprehend the goodness of the exodus of Egypt. You could have somebody, he says here, who is keeping the mitzvah of the Passover sacrifice, but he doesn't have the taste. He can't appreciate the taste. The whole thing is foreign to him or her. It's like, can we just get done with all this Haggadah stuff? Let's just eat. That's what the Rosh is saying. That's what the wicked son is saying. Why are you keeping? Why are you holding me back? I want to eat already. Come, let's finish this. Let's knock it off. Come on. Let's do the Haggadah thing and let's move on. we'll skip the Haggadah for tonight. You gotta go to tomorrow night. You have a second night. You have a second night of Pesach, right? So this is the reason for no stranger made of it. What was the idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the exodus from the bondage of Egypt? The bondage of Egypt. It was breaking out of this perpetual cycle of being embedded in materialism. It was the ability to rise above this this cycle that we were locked into. It's like the mouse in that. What do you call that? The wheel. He's running. What's he running after? Pretty much his own tail. He's never breaking out of that cycle. And the one thing that's interesting and important to note here in this text is that the stranger that the Torah is describing in the way the Izbitzer is explaining this text can be a religious person for all intents and purposes. Meaning a person who otherwise might be a practicing Jew, but does so only out of rote, does so only out of routine, and does it without any enthusiasm. He or she has no taste. There's no taste that's lingering in their mouth. It's like, why do I have to do this? It doesn't taste good. I'm not interested in all of this. I don't have any desire to continue. I have no desire to carry on. This is a waste of time for me. I have more important and more significant pursuits, people to see, places to go. And that is what the father of the children that the Torah is describing here wants to impart to the children. He wants to impart to them the taste. It's not just about information. It's about a spirit. He wants to impart that spirit of Yiddishkeit to his children. Now, for a Jew, the most pleasurable and valuable dimension of Yiddishkeit is what? Is not the social aspect. Social aspect is good, but it's not the social aspect. It's not even the fact that the Torah can bring us benefit in our own physical lives. It brings us benefit. Being honest brings you benefit. You don't end up a slimer. Right? The serenity that the Torah brings a person's mental health. So you don't end up in front of the shrink. Sometimes we do, but But generally speaking, the serenity that the Torah brings a person is real. So the purpose of Torah and mitzvahs is for us to appreciate our relationship with God. It's to experience a relationship with God. If we're missing the taste in our Yiddishkeit, we're missing the taste, the enjoyment, the alacrity, the excitement in performing mitzvahs, then that is a testimony to the fact that just to put this on Atazai. Perfect. Shekoyach. This is a lack of love for God. This is a lack of excitement and connection. We're missing the relationship. We're missing the pleasure, we're missing the delight. Now, when the Hasidic movement started, the Hasidim obviously had to do a lot of explaining. Yeah, they had a lot of explaining to do. What is all these new, what seemed to be new practices? Now, in truth, they weren't really all new. Many of them were simply reinstating a lot of old practices that were done away with in the recent generations. Talking about recent relative to them. So one time, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, ended up in a city called Shklov. Shklov still around? Not around? Well, the city must be there, maybe under a different name. But this Shklov was known as the hotbed of Hisnagdus, the hotbed of opposition to Hasidus. A lot of great Torah scholars there. People who were erudite and they were scholarly and geniuses. Really, truly great Torah scholars. So the Alter Rebbe, I don't know if he got a kick out of it, but I would certainly get a kick out of watching this, he would go and debate them. He would go and debate, he would come to a shul and he would debate. They would ask questions and he would debate. So one time he comes to a shul and he gets up on the bima. And they had all submitted their questions before, all kinds of thought-provoking questions, all kinds of incisive questions that were intended to, either intended sincerely or intended just simply to, make a mockery out of him if he couldn't answer. But what did the Alter Rebbe do? He avoided answering any of the questions, at least at the beginning. Here's what text number 10 tells us. The Alter Rebbe one time arrived in the city of Shklov during the period when the Chassidim were suffering tremendously at the hands of the Misnagdim. When the Rebbe walked up to the bima to respond to all of the questions that had been prepared for him, he said a short Torah, as was his custom then to deliver short ideas, in his trademark sing-song. The verse states, "Taste and see that God is good." The Rebbe proceeded to sing the Yiddish translation of these words, "Versucht wird ihr sehen, als der Eibishter ist gut." Now I just want to pause here for a moment and sing it to you the way the Rebbe actually repeated this. And I think he choked. It was very hard for him to say it with full composure. But this is the way it goes. Taimuriu ki tevavaye Versucht wird ihr sehen, als der Eibishter ist gut. Versucht. Alan, can we translate?
Somehow it seems, it wouldn't it be that you see somehow for Zucht?
So that's Zen.
Yeah.
That's Zen. To Zen. It sounds a little similar. Farzuchen means to taste. Mm-hmm. So if you walk into your mother's kitchen on Friday afternoon, when she's prepared all of the delicacies, I'm going to taste a little bit, because that's actually halacha. You're supposed to. It says Toyamecha Chayim Zochu. In the Musaf prayer of Shabbos, it says that those who taste of the Shabbos food will receive, will be granted life.
So the word comes from Zachu, from Hebrew.
Zochu means they will merit.
Oh.
Toyamecha Chayim Zochu. Farzucht, it's a Yiddish word. It's a Yiddish word. In fact, they tell over a story about one of the great rabbis, Rabbi Yonason Eibshitz. Maybe it was with a different rabbi, but whatever the case is, it's a good story. So when he was a young boy, he comes into the kitchen and he asks his mother for a piece of kugel on Friday afternoon. And his mother gives him a piece of kugel. Sure, take a piece of kugel. Because it's Toyameh, you're supposed to taste from all the Shabbos foods. So he asks for another piece of kugel. Okay, another piece of kugel. Before she knows it, she turns around and the whole kugel's gone. So she asks him, well, what's this all about? Well, you eat the whole kugel. You need kugel for Shabbos. So he says, it says in the Musaf prayer, Toyameh Chaim Zachu, those who taste it will merit life. And those who love it, Gedula Bacharu, they choose the large portion. So he went and he chose the large portion, he finished the rest of the kugel. So that's all a gleichwertel. That's all a cute little anecdote there. But now, seriously speaking, the Alter Rebbe's point was to this group of people was that if you taste Yiddishkeit, if you taste Chassidus, if you taste what it is, you will see God is good. You have to taste it. You have to go taste it. I think we talked about, I kind of alluded to this earlier when I was talking about the matzah. You can take the horse to the water, you can't make it drink, right? So, in a similar way, we can teach Chassidus, we can advertise that we're teaching Chassidus, but we can't force people to drink from it. But we can encourage, we can inspire people to drink from it. So, if we say, says the Alter Rebbe, time over you, taste from it. You'll see God is good. It tastes good. It's good. It'll give you a taste. It'll give you a geschmack. How do we translate geschmack? Is there any way to is there any words in English that will justify, the full measure of this word of geschmack? I don't know if there is. Geschmack is it's the pleasure, the delight, the absolute. What's the word I'm looking for? I guess I can't find the word, right? The ecstasy within Yiddishkeit, within Torah, if one just will taste it. And that's the purpose, that's the idea. That was his message to these people. When he alighted from the bima, tens of young scholars followed after him and eventually became some of the founding members of his chassidim. Some of the greatest chassidim of all time came from that meeting. He didn't go and debate them on substance. He could have. But because this is another point, by the way, very important. Very, very often people have questions, and their questions really are a result of emotional issues that they experience. Because of certain emotions, that forces them into a corner, into an ideological corner, and they will badger you with questions, but even if you answer their questions, they're not really interested in hearing your answers. They're just interested in maintaining and protecting how they felt or how they feel. It's not about the truth. It's not about the objective truth. It's just about making sure that I don't have to leave go of my emotions that somehow, indignation, they make me feel righteous. They make me feel right. They make me feel that I'm the right side of history. We all are familiar with this idea. So oftentimes people have other reasons for not embracing ideas that might be shared. They have emotional issues. And so the Alter Rebbe's point, I'll take your question in a second. The Alter Rebbe's point was, he's saying a niggin. And when he's saying a niggin, that kind of gave people an emotional outlet. And then all the questions melted away.
But there's quite a few niggins for Hasidus. And
Oh, yeah.
they're sort of universal.
There are some that are universal, I would agree with that. Many are only known in those Hasidic sects. Like in Chabad, there are certain nigunim that are universal. I think everybody knows those nigunim. And many are just known to those who study the texts and labor over Chabad Hasidus.
So
And I think that's the case in every Hasidus.
so what's the significance of that particular
This niggin?
niggin?
I can't tell you.
Is it a Pesach niggin, so to speak?
No, it wasn't specifically a Pesach niggin, because this is not specifically tied to Pesach. This is just the idea that he was able to win them over, not necessarily by addressing their questions head on. After he's saying the niggin, some of their questions just dissipated. It was like, questions are...
The light went on.
Huh?
Like a light went on.
Exactly. So, taking this a little further, text number 11. I once spoke, this is a chsicha of the Rebbe once described this. I once spoke with a certain Jew on this topic, and when I saw that my words were not having any real impact, I had no choice other than to cite a simple analogy. This particular Jew was a diamond polisher. I asked him how the price of a diamond is determined, and he explained to me the matter is determined based on the quality and volume of the stone. The quality refers to the general appearance, color, cleanliness, etc. Volume refers to its weight. Namely, a stone of 1 carat will have a certain price, and a stone of 100 carats will be worth 100 times more. So I asked him whether to carry a 100-carat diamond, one needs it to exert 100 times the amount of energy. Why then should it fetch such a high price? It's so much heavier. It's it's a schlep. It's a schlep. The Rebbe smiled and said, when this Jew heard my question, he exclaimed, I didn't expect such lazy questions even from you. I wish I could have a diamond that weighs 100 carats. Why not 1,000 or even 100,000? And I would happily take the effort to carry that stone into my possession. I persisted, but you have to work so hard to carry such a heavy weight. He replied, there's a limit to the ignorance here. We're talking about diamonds. It's worth every ounce of energy to lift a diamond. And what's more, it's not really even considered effort at all. On the contrary, it's the greatest pleasure. So it is with our overall religious experiences, says the Rebbe. They are true precious stones, and as such, our duties are indeed the greatest pleasure to be had. In that spirit, a Jew only seeks to increase his or her observance, looking for another thing to add to his or her religious pleasure. So if a person is able to tap into that inner dimension of Torah that gives them pleasure, gives them meaning, gives them taste, then that will catapult them to fulfill the mitzvahs, and they won't feel as though it's a burden. It's not a burden. That's why I cringe whenever I hear somebody say, it's difficult to be a Jew. We can't view Judaism like that. We have to view Judaism as Is it heavy? Of course it's heavy. But when we have the Geschmack, any heaviness is of no consequence. And now I'm just remembering there was another anecdote that I remember seeing when the Rebbe had first assumed the leadership of the Lubavitch movement. I think it was after he officially accepted the mantle of leadership, or was immediately before. But at some point he was making a siyum. He was concluding a tractate of the Talmud. And there was a big Gemara. They've got him a big Gemara from the shelf. So they thought it was too heavy for him. So they tried helping him hold it up. So the Rebbe answered, he said, Torah is a Rebbe kemol nit shver. Torah is never heavy for a Jew, for a Rebbe. By extension, I think the same should be said about every Jew. Torah shouldn't be heavy for any Jew. Torah is never heavy for any Jew. It's not heavy. It's geschmack. So all the heaviness is just of no consequence. Now let's just unpack this for a little bit more. We have this idea that a child is immature. You know, Hanukkah time, we give out Hanukkah geld. What's Hanukkah geld? Chocolate. To the kids, Hanukkah geld is chocolate, the very young ones. When they're a little older, they mature a little bit, Hanukkah geld is a few dollar bills. The chocolate, they know that with a dollar bill, they can buy 20 of them. But how often is it that you give Hanukkah geld, the chocolate Hanukkah geld to the kids, and then you give them $1? They lose the dollar, the chocolate, they make sure to hold on, mamish, like, as if their life depends on it. They'll hold it until it melts. The dollar they'll forget about. Don't give me that. I want real Hanukkah geld, they tell me. I want real Hanukkah geld. I'm not interested in the dollar. Why is that? Because there's a lack of maturity. They haven't developed an understanding for the value of money. And the same is in every other area of a child's development. Because of the lack of maturity, they haven't yet developed a taste for something that is really, truly worthy of their attention. At this point, they haven't yet gotten there. So they'll choose a candy or a lollipop over fine wine, over exquisite cuisine. They're not interested in that. They want hot dogs. They don't want fancy food. That's for adults. It's for Tati and Mami. It's a lack of maturity. And the same applies also in the spirit. That a person who hasn't yet come to realize the value of spirituality, the value that Judaism brings to the table, it's simply a result, it's a product of a lack of spiritual maturity. That's what it is. They haven't yet grown up in their spiritual life. That's what it is. Think about friendship for a minute. Friendship is something that's developed over time. If you spend many years with somebody and you're close friends, that's a friend. That is a friend that after even many years of separation, you're going to come see them for the first time in a long time. You're going to give a big hug and kiss.
Speaking of which, I saw Howard today on the subway. Just saying, a side note, my cousin.
Nice.
Just a side note.
My cousin.
Today, and your cousin.
Beautiful. And we share a cousin. Yeah. So that's the idea. When a person develops the friendship, when they put the work into the friendship, then the friendship is meaningful to them. But when you meet somebody for the first time, very seldom are you going to be instant friends. It doesn't work that way. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of interaction, a lot of the camaraderie. It has to develop, it has to evolve. Common experience, exactly. So on Pesach, when we emerged from Egypt, we were slaves in Egypt. What does God want us to achieve with all of this? He wanted to develop a relationship with us, but that relationship takes time to develop. It's not something that happens overnight. But He introduced us to the relationship. He said, now I want you to know you're my people. We're going to be good friends. We're going to have a deep relationship here. not going to be automatic. It's going to take some time. In text number 12, we read another fascinating interpretation of the meaning of kol ben nechar lo yochel boy, that a person who is a stranger should not eat from the Korban Pesach. What might that be? So the Mendel of Kotzk had an interesting twist on the words lo yeh becha kel zar, that there should be no strange God should be amongst you. So he says, do not let God be strange or foreign to you. Not don't have a foreign or strange God amongst you. Don't let God be foreign or strange to you. Neither to your heart nor to your soul. When we make Kiddush Friday night, we get up to make Kiddush. So we could mumble the words. We could just say them as though they are part of a ritual that we're only doing because my father did it, because my grandfather did it all the way back, and that's why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because they did it. I just want to I don't want to change anything. I don't want to break the chain. I want my kids to, and then if in the next generation they choose to be a little more involved than I, okay. But in terms of my own connection to God, there isn't much there. I'm just doing it because I'm just mumbling the words. What if somebody gets up and says Kiddush and thinks about how Hashem created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, and at this very moment all of the worlds are experiencing a ascent to a higher spiritual plane? We have now an opportunity to spend time with God alone. In the Siddur of the Arizal that we use, so before Kiddush, there's this little paragraph where we invite God, as it were, to join us in our Suda. We do that Shabbos by night, we do it Shabbos by day. So it's a spiritual rendezvous with God. So if somebody has that in mind, if somebody is thinking about that dimension of his relationship with God, his Kiddush is going to be different. He's going to say the words with a lot more excitement. And taking this a step further, the Rebbe once talked about how we address God in first person. We speak to Hashem and we say, let's say, Baruch Atah Hashem. Blessed are you. This was a talk he gave, I believe, on Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is when we say Atah Haresa. You remember the Atah Haresa that we say right when we take out the Torah? So we take out the Torahs and we honor everybody with a pasuk, and it begins. What's the first pasuk? Atah Haresa Ladas. You, God, have shown all of creation, all of reality. Who is the true sovereign? You've shown that it's all an extension of you. So in text number 13, using the term you expresses the close relationship a Jew has with God. In other words, the association of a Jew with God isn't of such nature that God is above in the heavens and the Jew is below on earth, and he requests from God to send his needs from the heavens. No, a Jew doesn't want to desire such a relationship. Rather, God is here with him, literally, and thus he can refer to God as you. Now, taking this all back to our original point. What is being said over here to the stranger who is not allowed to partake of the Pesach sacrifice? It's not that he's not allowed to. He can't. In his current spiritual state, he can't. He doesn't have a taste. It's not that he can't. Maybe in the time of the temple he couldn't. But the message for us is that the wicked son that's described in the Haggadah has no taste for the Pesach. He has no taste for the Pesach Korban. It's only the wise son, and that's why we finish off. What's our response to the wise son? Tell him about the Korban Pesach and how you shouldn't eat anything afterwards. You want the taste to linger in your mouth. Because the message to the wise son is, we need to develop a taste for Torah. We need to develop an appreciation for it. It's not something you're going to get all in 1 second, in one fell swoop. It's going to take time. It's going to take work to develop it. The Rasha is not in a state where he even wants to have develop a taste. He's got no taste. He's not interested in it. Come, let's skip it. Come, let's get this over with. So our response to him is, If you were there, you wouldn't come out. Why did God take us out? He took us out in order to have a taste, in order to have a relationship. But you're saying you don't want a relationship. If you were there, you wouldn't have been taken out. What's the point? The point isn't the response to the wicked son. The point is, we need to develop a relationship, we deepen our relationship with God, and that is the message of the Haggadah. That's the message of the wise son. And mind you, the reason why we put the wicked son next to the wise son and not next to the son who doesn't even know how to ask is because the task of the wise son is to lean over and talk a little bit with the wicked son. That's why we put them right next to each other. We read the Chacham, and then we say the Rasha Mahu Emer. What does the Rasha say? And we go on to the Tam and the Nesheni de Elisha. Because we want the wise son to have an influence on him. It's not okay just to say, I'm a wise son, I have a taste for Judaism, I have a taste for God, I have an appreciation for God. I have no responsibility to my brother who's the wicked son. No. Haggadah is telling you clearly and specifically, you have a responsibility. This is your responsibility. You're sitting next to him. You have to make sure that he hears a little bit of what you're hearing. He tastes a little bit of what you're tasting. And that's the message of Kol Ben Nechar LeYochaboy. We don't want God to be strange to us. We don't want God to be a stranger to our children. We want to bring God into the conversation. We want in our homes, God should be part of the conversation. God should be there. God should be present. The conversation on a regular day is, what does God want from us? What are divine values for our life? What do divine values say about this and this occurrence in the world? When this is going on in a certain country, or even in our own country, or in our city, or in our own congregation, what are the divine values? What do they dictate? And enjoy it. And sometimes it takes time to prepare that. Like for example, for Friday night, if you want to have a proper Friday night Su'udah with your children, you can't just arrive empty-handed. You have to actually show up having prepared something. You prepare what you're going to say, you prepare the ideas, you prepare, give the kids a geschmack. There's no better word. Geschmack. Give them a geschmack, a delight in something to appreciate, something to enjoy. With this, we'll close, and I'll just finish off maybe with a short story over here that they have, where there were two great sages, both students, Hasidic masters, in the second generation after the Baal Shem Tov, the same age, the same generation as the Baal Tanya, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, and the other was Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush. Baruch of Mezhebush was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev was a student of the Maggid, who was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. But these two had very different paths to the service of God. Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush was very contained. He didn't express himself with excitement, and there were a lot of there was some tension between the two great leaders. Now that doesn't scare us. Very often in Judaism we have tension between leadership. We have tension between two different schools of thought. It's nothing new. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, there was quite a bit of tension there too. But this was in the Hasidic group itself. You had some tension between Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev and Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev wanted to once come to Rabbi Baruch and spend Shabbos by him. So he sent a notice, he sent a request if he could come for Shabbos, and the answer was no, because your service of God on Shabbos is so wild, is so out of the box. I can't have you here. Here we're much more contained, and over there you're jumping around. When you're davening, you're jumping around, you're swinging your arms. This is too much. It's way too much from it's beyond my pay grade. This is not for me. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev promised that he would behave himself, and in fact he came and he behaved himself to a degree. They made Kiddush. Usually, Rabbi Yitzchak Barditcher, when he would make Kiddush, his cup would shake around, and you had to wear a raincoat just to make sure that you weren't, you didn't have to change your clothes afterwards. So he behaves himself during Kiddush, and then comes the challah. He doesn't make a big deal about that. And then comes the fish. They're serving the fish. They come around and they say, "What kind of fish does the Rebbe love? What kind of fish do you like? What kind of fish would?" So he takes the whole tray of fish and he pops it up into the air and he says, "I don't love fish. I love only God." And a piece of fish goes flying onto the Baruch of Mezhebush's talus. He used to wear a talus Friday night. And he was in midst of contemplation, deep contemplation. But this woke him up apparently. And the Hasidim tried cleaning it off. And he said, no. Don't clean it off. The fish...
Imprint?
huh?
The imprint?
The fish, what is it called?
Residue,
The residue, there's another word for it. The stuff that comes along with the fish. What is it called? Whatever it's called.
jelly?
Yeah, there's another word for it.
Gliver.
There you go. Fagliver. That's the Yiddish word.
That really says it.
So that's on my talus from a Jew who loves God. I don't want you cleaning that off. And for generations upon generations, that talus was handed down from one Hasidic master to another, and they would not clean off that stain from the fish, because that stain came from the fish of a Jew who loves God. Only God, doesn't love fish.
Tonka have it here, hanging up.
They have it here in the shul.
Find it, yeah.
Interesting, because you'll hear the rest of the end of the story. It might be another story, another tzaddik who threw fish. So finally, the talus ended up by the Minchas Elazar, Rabbi Chaim Elazar of Munkach, Rabbi Chaim Elazar Shapiro of Munkach. He passed away in 1937, and he requested that he be buried in that talus. And I believe he wore it for the final service of Yom Kippur, the Ne'ilah service. Apparently he saw the destruction that was going to happen, and he didn't want the talus falling into any other hands, so he decided that this was the right thing to do. He was going to be buried in the talus. So the talus that we have here with the stains must be from a different tzaddik and from a different piece of fish.
Minkacher talus.
Oh, it's a Munkach talus though. Okay. There may have been another tzaddik in Munkach that had a similar story happen to them. But what's the point? The point is that when we have true devotion and true taste for God, we taste God and we see that it's good. Yiddishkeit becomes something it's easy to carry. It's not a difficult thing. We're not looking to skip over the Haggadah and just get to the food. Why? Because we have a taste in our mouth. We have the Korban Pesach taste in our mouth. That's the idea. So with that, wish everybody a kosher and happy Pesach. I want to remind everybody again, in case anybody knows of a Jew who doesn't have matzah, will not have matzah, because they're not in the position to go to the store and get. For whatever reasons make a difference, let me know. We'll get the matzah, so they should have shmura matzah for Pesach.
Do you have a class next week?
God willing, should be a class. It's not going to be a Torah studies class, but God willing, should be a class. You'll watch out for the email. If there's no class, then you'll see. There probably will be no notice about it. Okay.
Yeah.